everyone. So thank you for joining the session with us today. So today we'll be having another Southern Region advisor, Matthew Gleason, to talk about some manipulative and some other TESOL theory with us. But and I will be recording the session and also presenting the screen. So let's give a big hand for Matt.
All right, thank you for the virtual hand. All right, good morning and good evening, everybody. Good to see all your smiling faces. Yes, as Kenny mentioned, today we'll be doing a TESOL overview, kind of go over the basic history, a brief history of TESOL and some of the basic vocabulary, jargon, terminology, so that when we give our feedback, when we observe you, when we respond to your reports, we kind of are using the same terms and jargon. So this will be kind of just a backdrop of what is TESOL. And then part two, we'll start to venture into what are some best TESOL practices. So the first part will be a little bit more of the theory. And there we go, we got my slides up. A little bit more of the theory. We'll go over some of the methods. And then part two will be more of best practices. But before we start, let's do a quick warm up. By the way, my name is Matt. I'll be one of the advisors for the Southern region. I had experience teaching in Japan, Tokyo, in the Philippines, and now Taiwan. All right, so part one is our TESOL crash course. What is TESOL? Basics of language education, foundational terms, concepts, and a brief history. And then part two, we'll talk about how do we learn, what are some best teaching practices, and what are some best TESOL practices. And then hopefully we'll have time. The last 30 minutes, if you could just, we'll just have an open forum, maybe Sean and Celine, they're also available, and even Kenny. And I see Kevy here. Kevy is the lead advisor. So if Kevy, I think he's not listening, but if he has any input, he's welcome to share some of his experience and thoughts as well. But just a reminder, a famous acronym in the TESOL field is ESID. So every situation is different. Every region is different. Every school is different. And every classroom is different. Your co-teachers are going to be different. So all of you are going to have very, very unique situations. And because of that, it's important not to compare our experiences. Because when we compare, it's not equal comparison. We're not dealing with the same variables. So just whatever your situation is, make the most of it, right? And we're going to have to adapt to our unique learners and the unique context of our schools. All right, so I want to learn a little bit about you. So how much teaching experience do you already have? From a scale of 1 to 5, and you can just type your answers in the chat box. So 1 is 0 experience, and then 5, a pretty solid amount. All right, so mostly 2s and 3s, which is perfectly fine. Even 1s and 2s, there's no problem at all. A couple 4s. Because teaching English in the TESOL field is much different than, say, teaching elementary school or middle school in the United States. So it's just a different field, and you're going to use completely different strategies and techniques. All right, next question. All right, next question. How excited are you to start teaching in Taiwan? 5 being super duper excited, and 1 meh. All right, awesome. So almost all fives. And Susan, you had 500. How excited are you, Susan? You must be getting bored back in the US. All right, and a similar question. How excited are you to arrive in Taiwan? Susan, 5,000. Sean, I didn't see your answer. And of course, we really appreciate all your patience. We know this has been a long process, but everybody has been working behind the scenes as hard as they can to just expedite the process every day. You know, they've been calling for the visa. So the Fulbright team has been working overtime to get you guys here as quickly as possible. And we're all very excited for you to arrive. And then let's do a one-word response. In one word, describe what you're most looking forward to doing at your school. Relationships, cool. Connection, pineapples. Dialogues, flourishing, good. Learning. Game. All right, Alex, we're gonna get along. Unicycle, cool. Silliness. Charlie, would you like to explain your answer, silliness? That's a unique one.
Sure. I've been working as a software engineer for a while, and I'm excited for the transition from that to more of a classroom setting where maybe there's some more silliness involved.
Yeah, and you'll find your younger learners in elementary school, they respond really, really, really well to any silliness, you know. So the classroom is a great opportunity to show your silly side. So you can kind of hook learners with this, your fun nature jokes, and then you're going to balance that with, you know, practicing the target material and learning in general. And Jamie, you mentioned pineapples.
So the school that I got matched with, they were saying that they were doing thematic teaching on pineapples. So I'm really excited to like think about different ways to incorporate pineapples into like teaching English.
Awesome. So I've never heard of that, but that's really, really cool. So you're going to know everything about pineapples by the end of the semester. Maybe 10 different ways to cook them. Cool. All right, let's keep going. I think, what are we at now? In one word, describe what you are most looking forward to doing in Taiwan. Exploring, cool. Eating. Food. All right. Teaching, good answer. Scootering, be careful though with the scootering. It can be dangerous. Relationships, making friends. Awesome. Food, traveling. I see a lot of food. My favorite Taiwanese food is dumpling. Kenny, would you like to explain what a dumpling is?
So a dumpling will be like a Chinese pancake. So we'll have a batter and eggs, and then some shops they will put some additions like bacon, ham, hot dog, corn, tuna, and they're delicious.
Excellent. Thank you, Kenny. I see a lot of food, exploring, making friends, and traveling. And document these experiences. Right? Make sure you're taking pictures, not just for your family back home, but your students are going to love to see you exploring Taiwan as well. You know, if you're trying a Taiwanese food for the first time, take a picture, take a video of it, use that as an intro or warm up in your class. Right? Next question. All right. Now on to some teaching topics. In one word, summarize what is good teaching. See what you did there, Charlie? It's clever. Engagement, good. Understanding, good. Preparation. Sean, would you like to explain why you said preparation?
Sure. Even people that have been teaching for a long time have to be prepared. They have to have the material ready. They have to have read the text. They have to have taught it before, typically. So it's really hard to improvise an entire lesson. So gotta be ready. Gotta be prepared.
Absolutely. And I think one thing Sean will get into some more this semester is no matter how prepared you are, sometimes your lesson is going to veer in a direction you didn't expect. And you have to think on your feet and adapt to the moments. You're going to have all these teaching moments just suddenly pop up in your class. And if you just stick to your lesson plan or your outline, you're going to miss a lot of these really rich and cool and immersive teaching moments. So, and that's part of your preparation, you know, just building your expectations. Which direction could this topic go in the classroom and how will I adapt to it? And I like, Nathan, you said inspirational. Would you like to explain that one a little bit?
Sure. I'm just thinking on the lines of you only have so much time in the classroom with your students. And I think that one thing that can makes teaching really effective is if you can inspire students to develop interest beyond your specific class so they continue to learn and continue to work on the topics that you teach them.
Absolutely. So when we approach our classroom and our lessons, we have to think long term. So we're not just focused on our students learning the target material of the day, but hopefully we instill in them a sort of motivation or inspiration to become lifelong English learners. So get them to fall in love with the English language, how it can benefit them in the future. And hopefully this motivation, you know, they'll have such a great experience in our classroom. You'll build those connections and the relationships that they'll just instinctively, you know, just carry on learning English. And also the learning goes both ways. And I think this includes inspiration. So you'll find these moments where your students are going to inspire you, right? And that's just part of, you know, building this classroom of interconnectivity and these connections and relationships. So it can be a very profound experience, you know, when these moments of inspiration going both ways, even with your co-teacher and your local communities. So absolutely. All right, let's keep going. Oh, this is an interesting one. In one word, summarize your teaching philosophy. Compassion. 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 Adaption. Understanding. Good. Very good. Supportive. Engagement. Good, Max. Patience. Lots of patience. Motivating. Cool. Facilitatory. Good. Well-roundedness. Excellent. Let's see. We got some good ones here. How about Lexi? Do you mind explaining why you chose adaptation or adaptation? Yeah, adaptation.
Yeah, sure. I just think it's a super important quality to have as a teacher because no matter how much you prepare and you're ready for a lesson to give, you never know what's going to happen or how your students are going to react. So I think it's super important to be flexible and adaptable, and you might need to change a lesson right in the middle of it or find something new to do. So you just have to be ready to flip on a dime, and I think that's a quality that sometimes can be hard to learn. So it's something we all need to practice while we are in the position of being a teacher.
Right, absolutely. So you're going to have to think on your feet. You have to go with the moment. It's going to be a lot of spontaneity, but balancing the spontaneity with learning. And I think that's one of the reasons, just having a firm foundation in our best teaching practices. Once you kind of internalize these best teaching practices, you can know how to handle, when the lesson veers off into another direction. You can make sure that it's grounded just in learning theory and best TESOL practices. Absolutely. And then friendship is a good one. Evan, do you mind explaining why you chose the word friendship?
I don't have a whole lot of experience with teaching big groups at once, so I'm hoping this still applies as much, but with like tutoring or TAing, I feel like it's just so much better for the learning if like you have an actual connection to the person, what they can be excited about, what will inspire them to learn English. And I just think that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Thank you, Evan. Yes. So friendship or connecting with your students or building these relationships is going to do so much to enhance your classroom, right? The more you know about your students, the more you know how to reach them, the more you know how to engage them. So find out what they're interested in, and just find ways to add their interests and their hobbies into the lessons. And this is just one small way you can really enhance your lessons. And then last one, Georgia, I also liked yours. You say well-roundedness. Do you mind explaining that a little bit?
Yeah, I think like being well-rounded is just an important characteristic of like most people. So like being able to uh, engage with different peoples and different backgrounds is really important, and that's sort of like a marker of like well-roundedness, I think.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Yes, well-roundedness, that covers a lot of ground, I think. Yes, connecting with all your students and teachers in local community, and also having well-rounded lessons, right? We just don't want to do the same lesson plan or the same activity or the same style of learning every classroom. So even if you love art, do a lot of art activities, but don't always do art. Balance it with songs, balance it with games, physical movements, kinesthetic learning, writing tasks, oral tasks. So the more variety we can add to our lesson becomes more well-rounded. And it also becomes engaging because we're targeting different learning styles, different ways of learning, and also different learner interests as well. All right, let's keep going. All right, so I have a puzzle for you. So let's see. Sean, do you mind reading the first paragraph? The first two paragraphs?
The whole thing, the two paragraphs?
Yeah, let's just read it all.
Okay. The procedure is actually quite simple. First, you arrange things into different groups. Of course, one pile may be sufficient depending on how much there is to do. If you have to go somewhere else due to lack of facilities, that is the next step. Otherwise, you are pretty well set. It is important not to overdo things. That is, it is better to do too few things at once than too many. In the short run, this may not seem important, but complications can easily arise. A mistake can be expensive as well. At first, the whole procedure will seem complicated. Soon, however, it will become just another facet of life. It is difficult to foresee any end to the necessity for this task in the immediate future, but then one can never tell. After the procedure is completed, one arranges the materials into different groups again. Then they can be put into their appropriate places. Eventually, they will be used once more and the whole cycle will then have to be repeated. However, that is part of life.
All right, thank you, Sean. Wonderful reading. And I would like you to type your guesses. What do you think this passage is describing? So take a few seconds to think about it and go ahead and type what you think it is describing. All right, so a lot of people think laundry. Sean, do you have any guesses?
Not really. Laundry sounds pretty good. By the way, it seems like there's some ETAs that can't get in. Is Kenny in charge? Is he the gatekeeper right now?
I informed Taipei.
Sorry?
Informed Taipei. Taipei is in charge because
Oh,
it's
okay.
recording lessons.
Okay, so they have to let people
Yeah.
in. Okay, hopefully they do that.
All right, so Emily, why did you think it was laundry?
For me, there were like a couple big clues. I think like organizing into different groups and like different piles, as Sean just put in the chat, and also the lack of facilities was kind of key. That like you need something like some sort of technology or something is needed to help you get this done. I also think like the small piles are better than having too many, as that could be expensive, like needing to buy new clothes or if like something happens to your machines. Um, and having to like do this cycle over and over again, even like right after you do it, you might have to do it all over again. So I think those were some of like the biggest clues for me.
All right, jigsaw puzzle. So Emily, you are absolutely correct. So I think this is the quickest the group has ever got it, right, Kenny? But the point of this paragraph is it's usually hard to understand what is being described, and it's purposely written to be difficult to make connections, right? And when the brain can't make connections, it has trouble processing material. All right, next slide. So the answer is, drum roll, laundry. Does it make sense now? So usually, actually, most groups don't get it right. They guess some really weird stuff sometimes. And yes, it is from 1972. Good point, Sean. All right, next slide. All right. So what does this have to do with learning? Is that learning is a connection making process. So if you're in the classroom and you're not making connections to the student's background knowledge, the students aren't going to process the incoming data. So I think, was it Evan that mentioned friendships and getting to know your learners? That's one of the reasons why it's a best teaching practice, because you have to know who your learners are to activate their background knowledge. So get to know your students, and then, in the warm up in the beginning of class, whatever your topic is, start the day off with just activating what that topic is. If you're doing a restaurant lesson, the warm up should just activate the category of knowledge, what they call schema. It's going to activate the schema of food and restaurants. So then all the incoming data that's going to happen throughout your lesson, the brain is going to know how to process and categorize it into different places in the brain. So when we cannot make these connections with new input, the brain quickly becomes lost, confused, and often misinterprets the incoming data. So our key point here, learning is a connection-making process. We learn best when we can connect new material to previously learned stores of knowledge. When we cannot categorize new material, we become lost and confused. Students' home culture provides a useful framework of familiar knowledge through which they can connect to and process new material. It also affirms learner identity. When your identity is part of the learning process, we want to learn more. All right, so now on to our topic of today. So does anybody know, what does TESOL stand for? All right, excellent, Jamie. So TESOL stands for Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. Very good. But what is the difference from TESOL and say, Kenny? All right, what is ESL? Excellent, Juliana. Yes, ESL is English as a second language. How about ELT? ELT, English language teacher. I'll give it to you. It's English language teaching. Close enough. Very good, Charlie. All right, how about TEFL? TEFL, TEFL. All right, Lexi and Evan, that's absolutely right. TEFL is teaching English as a foreign language. Very good. How about EFL? Excellent, Max. Yes, EFL is English as a foreign language. And how about EAL? This is a hard one. EAL. Perfect, Evan. Yes, that was a challenge. English as an additional language. That's EAL. How about, what is L1? What is L1? Good, Alex. Yes, and L1 is your first language or your mother tongue or your native language. And how about L2? Excellent. L2 is your second language. And I think we have one more. What is TMT? Any guesses? All right, next slide. So that was a trick question. So TMT is too many terms. So one thing you'll notice in this TESOL field is it loves acronyms. Like there's just hundreds and hundreds of acronyms, and so many of them are nearly the same. So they might be a little different, such as ELL, English Language Learner, or EL, English Learner, right? It's almost the same thing, but people just keep creating more and more acronyms. All right, next slide. Our fun fact of the day is L2 refers to any language learned after a speaker's L1. So you can actually have many L2s. You can have 3, 4, 5, or 6 L2s. Any language after your first language is referred to as an L2. And also, all right, yes, so your third or fourth or fifth language is technically categorized as a second language, or L2. And also, it's interesting, it's possible to have more than one L1. right? If the parents speak different languages, the child grows up with more than one native language. You can have multiple mother tongues, which is pretty cool. All right, and now you know. Probably the most important acronym. So TESOL is the big umbrella term for all of these acronyms. But probably the most important two are the difference between ESL and EFL. So in Taiwan, teaching English is going to be EFL, and it's going to be pretty different from ESL. So EFL is teaching English in non-English speaking regions, and learners are not exposed to English in their daily lives. So if you're teaching English to non-natives in the US, you're probably going to be teaching ESL. So ESL is teaching of English in an English-speaking region. In inner circles, ESL is usually taught to immigrants and refugees. ESL also includes outer circle English-speaking countries. So if English is the official language of a country, usually that's going to be the ESL field. If English is not the official language of the country and there's little to no exposure to English in the community, it's probably going to be EFL. And here's a map of ESL versus EFL. The gray is going to be EFL. So the blue ones are where English is an official language or a predominantly spoken language. And the gray areas is where there's little to no English spoken. And okay, next slide. All right, my next question for all of you, I'd like you to take about 30 seconds to think about this one, is why learn English? So why are we coming to Taiwan to teach English? What's the point of it all? Why should our students learn English? How will that benefit them and their future lives? So take about 30 seconds to reflect, and hopefully we get a couple to share. All right, would anybody like to share their reflections on why learning English is important?
Hey, so I was thinking, since English is like widely spoken around the world, I feel like it can open opportunities for students in foreign countries and into more global jobs and things like that potentially.
Right, so more and more we're having a global economy, and more it's looking like English is a front runner for the global language of this interconnected world. Yes, so students will be able to travel the world and work at international companies as well. So it opens career opportunities, absolutely. Georgia, you mentioned science. Would you like to explain that?
Yeah, so a lot of national conferences speak, like, most people speak English, and to communicate with like other scientists, the most common language is science, or response is science, is English.
Right, I think most science journals and research articles, I believe, are written in English. And also, say your students, they wanted to present at an international conference, in any field, English is going to open up that door for them as well. And it's going to give them the confidence to do that, just to explore these opportunities that the world has to offer. Right. Anybody else have any inputs? So I'm kind of interested from the Taiwanese perspective. So Virgil, would you like to explain why you think learning English is important?
Okay, first of all the school and teachers, they ask us to learn English because they say this is the most important tool to get into this global community. And second, to me, because due to learning English, I don't have to wait for the translation from like books, different edition, and sometimes I realize you read the translation version will be a little bit different if you read the original English. So I think learning English makes our life have more fun on it. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Virgil. So I like Virgil says English opens the door to the global community. And this involves more than career opportunities, but making friends, right? You can have fun making friends with people all over the world. And yeah, and you can read authentic texts and kind of know, if you're reading English literature, know exactly what the author was thinking. All right, let's do one more. How about Kenny? Kenny, why do you think learning English is important?
Okay, so if it's the question why they're in English, to be honest, I'm not sure why did I learn English in the first place. My parents just sent me to a grammar school and I quite enjoy it. But I will say that the benefits that I got from learning English will be, like Roger said, authentic movies, authentic novels, authentic songs. You don't need to wait for the translation. And also I think just meeting more people, like if not for learning English, I would not be able to apply for this job and to get to know these ETAs.
All right, awesome. So Kenny is doing it for the ETAs. He's doing it for you. So he wants to make these connections. Great. All right, let's keep going. Running out of time. All right. So in the field of English, we have what are called these three circles. We have the inner circle, which are referred to as your native English speakers, which is around 350 million. Then we have the outer circle. Usually these are the areas that English countries colonized and English became an official language of these countries, such as India, the Philippines, and also, these are countries that have since adopted English as an official language, such as Singapore. And there's about also 300 million. And then we have our expanding circle. And this is where English is a second language, but it's gaining importance in the country's economy. More and more people are learning English in these countries, and just the level of importance is rising, say Taiwan. All right. Why is this important? Next slide. It's important because did you know that English is the first language in human history to have more non-native speakers than native speakers? So our non-native speakers actually make up 70% of English speakers. Native speakers only make up 30%. And kind of currently and previously, it's been native English speakers who are influencing the language, influencing the norms of the language. And then we have non-native English speakers kind of adapting and learning norms from the native English speakers. However, next slide, next slide. However, we have to remember who is learning and using a language has the potential to shape and change the language itself. So I think in the future, as this expanding base of non-native English speakers grows more and more, it's going to be non-native English speakers creating new language norms of the language. So this has a lot of implications for us as native experts of the field. And it also can give rise in importance to non-native speakers. So I encourage actually that your role is not a native English speaker, right? Your value in the classroom is not a native English speaker. because in part 2, we'll learn how this can actually hinder your teaching ability. So a lot of the observations I do, we have the native English speaker ETA, their turn. They talk too fast. The students cannot understand their teacher input. They're using slang. They're using idioms that the students don't know. They believe that just being a native speaker, the students are somehow absorbing and learning. But this isn't true at all. So if the students are not processing our teacher input, they're not going to learn anything. So simply being a native English speaker has little to actually no value in our classrooms, in my opinion. All right, so we'll go to the 4 skills of language learning. So the 4 skills are listening, speaking, reading, and writing. But actually in today's world, they're going to say there's a 5th skill. Next slide. All right, so can anybody guess? Okay, we won't guess, I'll just tell you. So in today's world, culture is considered the 5th skill of language learning. And this is because culture and language are so closely connected that when you learn a language, you also have to learn the culture that goes along with that language, because knowing the culture is going to help you be a better communicator. And when we talk about learning culture or teaching culture, it's really a 3-pronged approach. We have the student's home culture, which will validate their identity, can activate that background knowledge, and it also personalizes our course content to our student's identity. Then we have the target language of the target culture, right? What is American culture? Knowledge of the target culture will make our learners better communicators in the target language. And then in today's world, English is a global language, so we can't forget about the world community. So your cultural lessons should involve immersion in world culture, which will increase students' cultural intelligence, intercultural skills, and global awareness to be engaged global citizens. So if your school or your LET asked you to teach a cultural lesson, don't just think you have to do American culture, right? You can teach about Taiwanese culture. Of course, you're welcome to teach about your own culture, but you can also include elements of world culture. And this is from the curriculum guide of Taipei City. So your 1st and 2nd graders are mostly going to be oral-based lessons. 80% is listening and speaking, and then 20% is reading and writing. 3rd and 4th, it will go to 60-40, and then by 5th and 6th grade, it will be balanced 50% listening and speaking, 50% reading and writing. And we talk about teaching. Usually there's 2 camps of teaching. We have our traditional teachers. Many of your LETs might be more traditional teachers. This is your direct instructions. This is rote learning, sit and drill, memorize facts, memorize important people, dates, and things. The benefits of traditional teaching is a very high short-term retention of knowledge, but there's little to no long-term retention, and it can also be very boring, right? And your students will have low motivation for learning. On the other hand, we have more modern teaching instruction, which is also called indirect instruction, which is more learning by doing, having hands-on activities, and it's active and multisensory. It's all about getting students to participate and interact with the target language or the content. And the results are high, short, and long-term retention. There's high engagement, and there's high motivation for learning. In the TESOL field, part of this is some teachers will focus only on accuracy. Accuracy is producing language that conforms to target language norms. So are they pronouncing a word like an American speaker or a British speaker? So this is just going to emphasize the accuracy. Is the grammar right? Fluency, however, is just focused on the ability to communicate. So it's not so focused on is the grammar 100% correct or the pronunciation 100% correct, but are ideas communicated? Are you communicating what you want to communicate in the target language? So this is your fluency. So usually people divide into two camps, but a best teaching practice is just balance the two. Focus some of your lesson on accuracy, and then focus some of your lesson on fluency. And then we have some differences between teaching methods and teaching approaches. So a teaching approach is your general beliefs, principles, and assumptions about language teaching and language learning that guides your instructional techniques in your classroom practices. So this is your general teaching philosophy, what you think about learning, how you think students learn language best. And then we have a teaching method is kind of the systematic and procedure blueprint, right? So this is what maps out your approach. How are you going to teach the language? What techniques are you going to use? So methods are a systematic set of teaching practices based on a particular theory of language and language learning. So approaches are kind of your beliefs about learning, and your teaching method is your systematic blueprint for carrying out the lesson. And we have our timeline of TESOL, so it's kind of fuzzy, but there's been a lot of different methods that come in and out of flavor. The oldest method was our grammar translation method, and this was simply translating ancient Greek classics from ancient Greek or Latin into English. So students memorized obscure vocabulary, they memorized obscure grammar rules, all for the sake of translating these ancient literature texts. It's interesting, classroom instruction was carried out in the L1. So classroom instruction was in the student's native language, and they simply translated into the target language. It was completely reading and writing. There was no communication. There was no oral element. And then we had the direct method. So the direct method was the complete opposite. So the whole lesson was in the L2. So there was zero use of the L1. And the direct method is also called the natural method or the Berlitz method. And it wants to get the learners to think in the L2. So they believe that the L1 interferes with the language learning process. So they're going to get rid of the L1 and they're going to demonstrate. They're going to use props. They're going to use realia. They're going to use visuals. But they're never going to use the L1. And the goal is to get the students to think in the L2, process language in the L2, and then communicate in the L2. So this is our direct method. And then after this, we have the audio-lingual approach. Audio-lingual approach, also called the Army method. So the Army method, the Army used the audio-lingual approach. It's known for its drills, right? It's just going to drill the target language, memorize a dialogue, memorize a situational dialogue, repeat after the teacher, a lot of parroting, a lot of mimicry, I say, you say. So they believed all you had to do was memorize dialogues and you would learn a language. Then we start to branch out into different methods. We had the silent way, the total physical response, community language learning. Suggestopedia is an interesting one. So we go from the regimented Army method, which is drill. It's kind of boring. Students get disengaged, but they do memorize these dialogues. Suggestopedia is the opposite. It's just going to want students to relax. Take it easy. So establish a comfortable, calm, and positive learning environment, and then just slowly, with a relaxed tone and voice, teach the language. So they believed if the students were relaxed and had a positive mindset, they would simply absorb the language. And then we had the communicative language teaching, which is focusing on language as a tool just to communicate. So we're going to be more interactive and cooperative activities. All right, next slide. So you can review this slide later, but our awesome, amazingly awesome advisor, Celine, put this together for all of you. But it's kind of a quick sheet of the different approaches and theories in the TESOL field. I think we don't have time to dwell on this, but feel free to check this later. Some principles of the direct method is never translate, demonstrate. Never explain, act. Never imitate mistakes, correct. Never make a speech, ask questions. Never speak with single words, use sentences. Never speak too much, make students speak. Never use the book, use your lesson plan. Never jump around, follow your plan. Never go too fast, keep the pace of the student. Never speak too slowly, speak normal. Never speak too quickly, speak normal. Never speak too loudly, speak naturally. And never be impatient, take it easy. All right, so this was the direct method that came right after the Army method, or the audio came right before the audio-lingual Army method. All right, next slide. All right, let's see if our video will work. So I wanted to show you some of the drills of the audio-lingual approach. So while Kenny fixes the audio, hopefully, so drills have kind of fallen out of favor. People thought, you know, they're too boring, they're too military, students become disengaged. But this video shows how you can still use them in a fun way, because repetition is part of learning. We need to repeat target language to absorb it and to transfer to long-term memory. And I think especially for new or teachers with just some experience, mastering a basic set of drill. If a student says, hey, can you teach this vocabulary? Hey, can you teach this vocabulary? You have a set of 5 drills that you can go to and just do it. So once you master these drills, it's going to take little preparation for you. And again, you can adapt to the moment in the lesson. You can go with the flow. Because sometimes your LET will turn to you in the middle of class and be like, hey, can you review this topic with the class, right? So you're going to have these go-to techniques to pull it off. Kenny, are we having technical problems?
Yes, we are. I think I will send a link to the chat box.
All right, so if you don't mind just watching it on your own computer, I think it's about 3 minutes. So watch it on your own, and we'll come back in 3 minutes. All right, was everybody able to watch the video on their own? Yes? All right. So those are just a few drills. I think we had the repetition. Sean is awesome. Sean is awesome. The substitution, transformation, back chain drilling, and the split drill. So these are just some go-to ideas. If an LET turns to you in the middle of class and say, hey, practice this food vocabulary, right? And now you have some techniques that you can just get up and do boom, boom, boom. So I'm not against drilling. Drilling has fallen out of favor, but we need to repeat vocabulary and target languages for it to transfer to long-term memory. So a lot of teachers, they'll only repeat a vocabulary 2 times. You know, repeat after me. Pizza, pizza. But 2 times really is not enough to transfer this information to long-term memory. We actually need to do it over 10 times. We'll skip the rest of the video. Kenny, are we still having technical problems?
Let's try again.
So this one, Suggestipedia, is kind of just for fun. It's a very kind of hippie style of teaching where it just wants students to relax, take it easy, just enjoy life. So we can still watch a little bit without the sound. So look how the students are sitting down, and look how the teacher is going to sit down. So he puts his legs up, right? So and he's playing relaxing, calming music in the classroom. And he's going to have his students stretch. They're going to do some breathing exercises. So he's just going to get his class to be calm, in a relaxed state of mind. And they believe this relaxed, calm state of mind opens up this channel of learning. All right, we can go to the next one. All right, and our next video, and I'll have a link to these videos at the end so you can watch them on your own time with sound. You can go ahead and click play, Kenny, just so we can see but not hear. The next one is total physical response, also called TPR. So TPR is all about attaching physical movements to vocabulary or physical movements to target structures. This is very, 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 very effective with our young learners. You know, probably our 1st to 4th graders just respond really well to TPR. Anytime you can add gesture, if you're doing animals, add animal gestures and sounds, but charades. So the idea is that when knowledge is attached to physical movements, the knowledge lives within the body. All right. So this is very multi-sensory part of learning. The more senses that you stimulate during the learning process, the greater you retain the material. So this is just a very physical, multi-sensory style of learning. You can see the teacher here is gesturing and getting the students to react with physicality to the vocabulary and the target language. So it's a lot of physical movements. And also the physical movements also provide a context to the students, right? If they don't understand the words, but they can understand rubbing the belly might mean hungry. So it can help them process the language. It gives them an additional tool to process the language. So it's a very fun style of teaching. You get to be silly, right? So with your young learners, use a lot of TPR. Just be silly in front of your classroom by attaching gestures and physical movements to make your classroom very active. Again, we'll have the links at the end of this slide. But probably with your 5th graders and up, they'll start to lose interest in TPR, especially your 6th graders. So your 6th graders might not respond. They might roll their eyes to some TPR techniques. and also your middle school or junior high school, they might be too cool for school. But your young learners, again, probably 1st to 4th graders, maybe 5th graders, respond very, very well to total physical response. Okay, next slide. All right, a quick breakdown of some famous methods from the past. We have our grammar translation method. It's just read and translate. We have our direct method is the L2. Everything is in the L2. Audiolingual method, drill, drill, drill. Total physical response, movement. And then Suggestopedia, just relax. Enjoy the moment. All right. All right, so we'll do a quick quiz and then we'll take a 10-minute break. So if you all could guess what method you think this is. So our choices are grammar translation method, direct method, audiolingual method, TPR, Suggestopedia. All right, see a lot of Suggestopedia. Good, 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 good. You guys got it. Who was first? I don't know who's going to want to be first. Charlie, why did you guess Suggestopedia?
It looks like they're doing a very relaxing activity and they're sitting in these lounge chairs on the floor.
Perfect. So yes, this is Suggestopedia. Suggestopedia is known for letting students sit wherever they want. They can choose their seat. Usually they have beanie bag chairs or sofas. So again, it's kind of a hippie style of teaching. All right, next slide. All right, guess the method. All right, nobody wants to be first now. So any guess is okay. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. Any guesses? Watch, listen, repeat. All right. How about Tyler? What method do you think this is?
Yeah, it's potentially the audiolingual method.
And why do you think audiolingual?
Well, because it says like watch, listen, repeat. So I know that at least with audiolingual, like there's drilling is an important aspect of it. So kind of like that repetition is what keeps me into audiolingual.
Absolutely. So that's where I was going with this. Yes, the repeat, it's the parroting, students are just going to repeat after the teacher. And they also believe that just this repetition, they really wanted to minimize mistakes. So they believe that the students were performing it on their own, they're more likely to make mistakes. But if they're just repeating after the teacher, they're going to have very, very, very high accuracy. So audiolingual is all about accuracy as well. Drills are good for accuracy, right? So good guess, Jamie. It's not TPR, but good guess. All right, next one. Kenny? All right, next one. What method do you think this is? All right, Jamie, since you were first, I'll let you answer this one. I see a lot of TPRs.
For this one, I thought it was TPR because you see like the kids just in a weird position. They're younger too, so they're responding a little bit better, and they're just having fun and being silly, like moving their bodies and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is TPR. Again, that's our word silly. Don't be afraid to be silly with your young learners. And really, even if you're kind of not so outgoing, you're going to feed off the energy of your young learners, right? So you're just going to feed off their energy, and it's just going to come out. But again, TPR is about attaching physical movements to our vocabulary and target language. And when we combine learning with movement, we internalize it, and the knowledge lives within us. Very good, Jamie. Thank you. All right, next one. Kenny? All right, this is a harder one, but guess the method. All right, everybody's guessing direct. Alexia, you were the first to guess. Why did you say direct method?
Looking at how the classroom is set up, and also he's got the globe and the desk and the papers all in hand, it just looks like he's facing a classroom rather than keeping them engaged with him.
Good. Yes, so this is the direct method. You're absolutely correct. And again, he's drawing, right? Because he's not going to use the L1. He's not going to use the student's native language because the direct method is completely 100% the L2, the target language. And to do this, you're going to have to use, globes, real objects, realia, pictures, gestures, and demonstrations. So he's probably drawing the mountains because he's not going to explain it in the student's L1. Absolutely. All right, next slide. The last one is the easiest one. See a lot of grammar translation. All right. Evan, you were first. Why did you choose grammar translation?
I see very old-looking glasses on a book, as though they've been translating it.
Very good. So you all are correct. This is the grammar translation method, also called the classical method. So they're just translating classical pieces of literature into their L1. Yeah, again, it's a very boring kind of style of teaching, and they viewed language learning as more as a mental exercise. It was almost like playing chess to them. So they believed this was just to keep their brain fresh. They would memorize long lists of vocabulary and memorize long lists of grammar rules, and sometimes and often obscure and archaic grammar or vocabulary, because the language used in these classical texts wasn't always useful for communicating. So grammar translation was not about communicating, but just translating. Very good. All right, next slide. So I think it's just something to think about while we take a 5-minute break is, so we went over different methods. What method do you think is used today? So let's go ahead and take 5. Kenny, how long should our break be? 5 to 10 minutes?
Sure, 5 is okay.
5 is okay. So we'll come back here at 10:50 my time, which might be 10:50 p.m. your time. But take a 5-minute break and think about what method do you think is used today. All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's keep going. And again, I'd like to save maybe the last 15 minutes just for a Q&A with all the advisors. So if you have any questions, start thinking about now. And if we don't finish anything, we'll share these slides with you because we probably won't get through all the slides. But let's stop 15 minutes, 11:15 a.m. my time. But the last 15 minutes, let's just have an open-ended QA session. All right, so what method is used today? This is kind of a trick question. We're in what is known as the post-teaching era, post-method era, not post-teaching. We're in the post-method era, also known as kind of the eclectic method. So we're just going to take bits and pieces from previous methods, use what works from them. So maybe from Suggestipedia, you can use from that just having a positive classroom environment, right? Don't scare your learners. Get them to relax and have a positive mindset. From the direct method, we can get from that, that visuals are very important. Physical objects, realia, props. We can bring the language to life. But we don't have to go to the extremes anymore. So direct method was L2 only. There are going to be some times when it's okay to speak Chinese in your classrooms, right? There's going to be moments where it just is going to facilitate the learning. And you have to use your teacher's sense to know when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate. Maybe the grammar translation method. Maybe your students will translate some reading passages, right? That can be very beneficial. Audiolingual, we can use some of those drills, like repeating is important. Get the students to repeat the vocabulary often. So we can still use bits and pieces from these previous methods, but we're no longer locked into one, right? So it's the post-method era, also known as the eclectic era. All right, next slide. So we have one of my favorite reading passages about teaching, and more importantly, teaching beyond technique. And if we could have a few people, next slide. And if we could have a few people read, it would be amazing. So if anybody would like to read, if you could just raise your hand to read a paragraph. If not, I will. All right. Peony, would you like to read the first paragraph?
Yeah, sure. You also pronounced my name perfectly, so that was great.
Oh, I am so bad at names too.
On the first try, so that's great. Okay, I'll read the first one. After 3 decades of trying to learn my craft, every class comes down to this. My students and I, face to face, engaged in an ancient and exacting exchange called education. The techniques I have mastered do not disappear, but neither do they suffice. Face to face with my students, only one resource is at my immediate command. My identity, my selfhood, my sense of this I who teaches, without which I have no sense of the thou who learns.
Excellent. Celine, would you like to do the next paragraph?
Yeah, sure. One student I heard about said she could not describe her good teachers because they were so different from each other. But she could describe her bad teachers because they were all the same. Their words float somewhere in front of their faces, like the balloon speech in cartoons. With one remarkable image, she said it all. Bad teachers distance themselves from the subject they're teaching, and in the process, from their students.
Virgil, can you take the next paragraph?
I could do it if Virgil's.
It's a secret hidden in plain sight. Good teaching cannot be reduced to technique. Good teaching comes from the identity and integrity of the teacher. In every class I teach, my ability to connect with my students and to connect them with the subject depends less on the methods I use than on the degree to which I know and trust my selfhood and am willing to make it available and available in the service of learning.
Wonderful. And then Katie, you want to take it away for us for the last paragraph?
Sure. Good teachers join self, subject, and students in the fabric of life because they teach from an integral and undivided self. They manifest in their own lives and evoke in their students a capacity for connectedness. They are able to weave a complex web of connections between themselves, their subjects, and their students, so that students can learn to weave a world for themselves. The methods used by these weavers vary widely. Lectures, Socratic dialogues, laboratory experiments, collaborative problem solving, creative chaos. The connections made by good teachers are held not in their methods, but in their hearts, meaning heart in its ancient sense, the place where intellect and emotion and spirit and will converge in the human self.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katie. And I wish we had more time to just dissect this reading passage. I will have the link if you're interested in reading the full, it's a chapter from one of his books by Parker Palmer called The Heart of a Teacher. But to me, these 4 paragraphs kind of summarize how to be a good teacher. And it's not about dissecting teaching into specific techniques or methods or the theory behind it. But what's more important is just that genuine human element. So if you want to be a good teacher, step 1 is to be yourself. And to be yourself, you have to know who you are. And I think this journey, this Fulbright journey, is going to be a year of self-discovery. When you have 60 eyes on you in the classroom, it can be a very vulnerable experience. 60 eyes where you might have to step outside of your comfort zone, right? Be a little more silly than you're used to. Use a little silly voices or gestures. You sing a song or even do a dance, right? So you might be asked to step outside your comfort zone. And energy is very important, but I will say authentic energy is even more important than just being an energetic teacher. So when we talk about teaching, teach from the heart. The students, I think, deserve an authentic person to relate to, an authentic person to interact with. So your own selfhood and self-discovery is probably the most important thing to being a good teacher, more important than any techniques or theories that we talked about. And I hope, by the end of your Fulbright year, you kind of reflect on these passages as you go forth, and just focus on building a classroom full of these connectedness, these web of connections, getting to know your students, these relationships. So these are all words that popped up in our warm-up. So I think you all have a sense of this stuff. But a lot of times we try to condense teaching into fixed things. Do this, don't do that. Do that, don't do this. When we forget and overlook that human element. We're human, our students are human, right? Let's focus on this human connection, and our classroom becomes just this weaving of identity and content and learning and growth. All right, so it's all about this growth. So this again is a passage by Parker Palmer, Heart of the Teacher. We have a link to the full chapter. I really recommend reading. So I'm sure you're curious, what exactly will you be teaching in Taiwan? I will attach to this slide a curriculum guide from Taiwan that includes topics and vocabulary. I'll give you a sneak peek in the next slide. Again, it's pretty simple stuff. Your elementary school, usually it's fruits, vegetables, colors, animals, days of the week, months, numbers, alphabet, basic phonics. So the elementary school, again, it's EFL, English as a Foreign Language. We're starting at the basics. This is the basic building blocks of English. And again, this stuff, your snakes, dogs, you can use TPR with, right? You can act out different animals and insert them into a sentence. So just don't do the vocabulary, but bird, it is a bird. All right, next slide. And we'll have the full list. The link will be in the slides. But we have the curriculum guide. This is for grades 3 and 4. Their goal at the end of the semester, or at the end of the year, say all 26 letters of the alphabet. Can say the phonetic sounds, can say vocabulary learned in class, can use simple classroom language, can use simple daily phrases, can correctly pronounce phonetic sounds and use appropriate tones to say simple phrases. So this is the listening, this is the speaking component. So they broke down all the different skills and have the expectations and learning outcomes. Again, I'll attach it to the slide. So maybe when you're in quarantine in a few weeks, you can review some of this material. All right, next. All right, again, this is the cultural understanding performance guide. Grade 3 and 4, students can understand simple greetings both at home and abroad, can understand local festivals and customs, can understand festivals and customs of other countries, all right, and so on and so forth. So they break it down by grade and have learning performance and learning outcomes that are associated with each grade. All right. All right, a couple slides behind, let's keep going. All right, so part 2, briefly, we'll talk about some best TESOL practices. Next. We'll skip this warm-up. We already did a lot of warm-ups. All right, we'll skip this slide. So, all right, we'll go to our teacher case study 1, what not to do edition. So I'm going to give you an example of what you shouldn't do. All right, is that right? Next. So example number 1, what not to do. We have our drill master. Next. All right, sit down, be quiet, and learn. Students say, yes, sir. Good, repeat after me. Repeat after me. All right, just a joke. All right, so what should we do instead? Instead of being a drill master, what should we do in our classroom? How about Evan, are you with us?
I think we have 2.
We have 2. How about the other Evan? Since I don't, has he had a chance to participate?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. So Evan Chu, instead of being the drill master, how can we? What's another way we can deliver our instructions?
Yeah, I think instead of having them repeat exactly what you're saying back, I think it would be good to have them engage with each other in more natural conversation, or just provide the context or scenarios for them to practice, or give them some kind of grammar structure or framework for them to use, and then kind of do variations upon that. Yeah.
Wonderful, right. So one of the downside of these drills is there's little to no context, that they're just parroting, they're just mimicking the teacher, and they don't know how to use the language on their own outside of the content. So yes, student-to-student dialogue is a great way to build that fluency aspect, the communicative aspect of language. And another thing, this drill sergeant, are the students going to enjoy this lesson? They might feel scared, right? They might feel intimidated, and they might not want to learn English anymore. So I think this example also illustrates, next slide, that we need to establish a positive learning environment. And how do we do this? We can encourage and praise our students often. So encouragement can come in the verbal form, awesome, great job, very nice. It can be visual, just a big smile on your face, a big thumbs up, a high five. Encouragement can also be physical, a high five or fist bump. Of course, in the COVID era, we have to be cautious with our physical connections. But we also can establish a positive learning environment by having a positive teacher's presence, right? And I think having a teacher's presence involves the heart. You need to have passion, empathy, care, sincerity, effort. Students need to feel that you actually care about them. Like that's step one in building that connection. Your body, you have to show it, right? You have to be confident. You have to be welcoming. You have to be friendly, enthusiastic. All right, so don't stand in the front of the room with your arms crossed, right? Be open, have welcoming body language, just have a friendly, positive aura. We also have to have that mental side, right? We have to stimulate our students. We have to challenge them. If our lessons are too easy, they're going to get bored. But if our lessons are too difficult, they're going to get frustrated and disengaged. So you have to find that balance of challenging them without frustrating them. We also have to reward good behavior. You can do this with stickers, stamps, reward charts, stamp sheets, team points, participation points, or any sort of incentive system. And the good thing about incentive systems is you can remove the incentive, right? And instead of punishing the class with negative punishment, you can just take away their reward, right? And then if they have good behavior, give them back the reward, right? So there's a lot of less negativity with this classroom management style. All right, next. So here are some examples of some sticker charts. Classroom Dojo is also a web tool that you can use to keep track of points. We also have a sticker progress chart. All right, next. So part of building a positive learning environment is this concept that negative emotions interfere with learning. If you're full of anxiety, if you're full of stress, if you're full of worry and doubt, this is going to be a barrier between learning new things. Krashen said, learning ceases when anxiety is high. And this is known as the affective filter, right? So the affective filter is that barrier that's preventing learning from occurring, and the filter is all those negative emotions of stress, anxiety, worry, doubt, concern. And the more that we can establish a positive and friendly learning environment, we can lower our students' affective filter to enhance learning. All right, next. And the foreign language classroom naturally has a lot of anxiety. So a lot of people are just afraid to speak a second language. This is known as xenoglossophobia. And because of xenoglossophobia, it's especially important to establish that positive learning environment. Your learners, they're gonna have a lot of anxiety to produce these target languages, so you have to establish a supportive classroom for them. All right, next. All right, teacher case study number 2, what not to do. We have teacher speed talker. So the teacher speed talker talks so fast that students become lost, confused, and frustrated. Teacher speed talker doesn't care because teacher speed talker believes modeling native English is more important than student understanding. And again, this is probably going to be the biggest challenge for a lot of you, is that you get in front of the classroom and you're going to speak like a native speaker. But if you do this, right, if you talk at a natural speaking speed, if you're using vocabulary that your students haven't learned, if you're using target structures that your students haven't learned, if you're using slang or idiom, your students are not going to be able to follow along with your speech. If your students are not following along with your speech, they're not going to learn the language. So simply being a native speaker can actually hinder your teaching. right? I believe that a native speaker, it's in a way, it's a barrier to being an English teacher, especially for younger learners. When you get to high school and university, this becomes less of a concern. But with our younger learners who are just learning their fruits, days of the week, numbers, alphabets, we really have to simplify our speech, which we call, next slide. All right. Okay, so high exposure to the target language will result in language learning. This is a common assumption, right, of second language teaching, the total immersion model. However, just talking or free conversation is not language teaching. In other words, simply being a native speaker does not in of itself qualify one as a teacher of that language. Conscious and extensive knowledge of grammar does not make one a language teacher either. Rather, the defining characteristic of a good teacher is someone who can make input comprehensible to a non-native speaker, regardless of his or her level of competence in the target language. This leads naturally to another topic: how teachers make input comprehensible. Next slide. All right, so best TESOL practice, we call this elaborating input. So elaborating input is making your speech, your teacher's speech, comprehensible to your learners. And you can do this by speaking slowly, speaking clearly, check for comprehension as you go, repeat yourself often, minimize the use of slang or idioms, especially like football slang. Like they don't know the sport of football, so don't say like he goes the whole 9 yards or touchdown. Like it's going to be meaningless to them. Use level appropriate and familiar vocabulary. And scaffold, support your lesson with non-linguistic input. This could be visuals, gestures, objects, realia, which is physical objects, and model the target language. And a great quote on this is, the learner must be able to understand what the speaker or writer is saying if acquisition is to happen. The learner must be able to figure out what the speaker is saying if he is to attach the meaning to the speech stream coming at him. So a best teaching practice is to elaborate your input to make it comprehensible. We have to go down to our level of our learners. Make your input comprehensible at their level. Next slide. All right, our last one, and then we'll do our Q&A. Teacher case study number 3, what not to do. What day of the week is it? Yes, it's Wednesday. All right, we'll skip the discussion. But the point is, okay, there's 2 points to what not to do. Is you have to give students time to process, right? They're going to think a little slower in a second language, right? It's natural. So just pause, give them time to process it, and give them time to produce the language. Don't expect an immediate response. Also, we need to learn our students' names, right? Don't call them, hey, you answer the question. Part of learning is all about identity. So build these culturally relevant relationships, learn your students' names, be approachable, just smile, be yourself, be friendly, have that authentic energy, interact with students as much as possible. This interaction could be as simple as waving and saying hello to every student that you walk by. Everyone. If you walk by a student, wave and smile and say hello. Join an after-school club if you have time. You know, there's basketball, skating, volleyball, music, art. So there's a lot of after-school clubs. Ask your students to teach you about Taiwanese culture, right? We love sharing our own culture with others. Use student surveys to get to know them, and share your knowledge of Taiwanese culture with your students, right? So we talked about this in the first warm-up, right? If you try a new Taiwanese food, document it. If you go to a new place, document it and share your students the pictures and the videos. I'm sure their eyes will light up, and they'll appreciate that you are enjoying and exploring their country. All right, next slide. So culturally relevant teaching weaves connections between target content, learner identity, and teacher identity. This goes back to that web of connections, building these relationships, even these friendships. So it's about identity. Who are your students? It's about their background, and it's about their needs, and then weaving these all together into your lessons in your classrooms. All right. All right, let's just skip these. All right, some general TESOL tips. One, add lots and lots of visuals. So images are engaging. The more pictures you can add to your lessons or your PPT, the more your students will be engaged. Tip two, build suspense. Don't just describe, don't just show, get your students to guess first. So I always say tease, don't tell. So guessing builds suspense, guessing builds interactivity. And try to make your lessons interactive. Don't just talk at them, but ask interactive questions as you go along. These could be yes or no questions, right? Thumbs up if you like pizza, yes or no. Or point to this, point to the color blue, or ask X or Y questions. Do you like pizza or cheeseburgers? And have your class vote, right? So make it interactive as you go. Tip four, keep it simple. Again, the second language is a field with a lot of unknowns already. So simplicity is the key. Simple but interesting. Don't overwhelm your students with content. Don't overwhelm them with your speech stream. So simplify your content, but also take it to make sure you're challenging them as well. And my last tip, make sure you're assessing as you go and always review the key points. So part of learning and memory is this spaced retrieval. We have to recycle previously learned content. Don't just jump from one content to the next, but assess. You're going to assess your learners to make sure they're learning what you're teaching. And then we need to review these key points just to keep it fresh in their memory. Right, we'll skip scaffolding. I think we can talk about scaffolding in future workshops, but scaffolding is an important concept. It's how we're supporting our learners. And the idea of a scaffold is to support them and eventually remove the supports so the learners can do the task on their own. There's a lot of different techniques that we can scaffold the learning process with, but we'll have time, I think, in future workshops. So you can review these later. And then we have our 6 TESOL principles. Principle 1 is know your learner. Principle 2 is create a positive classroom. Principle 3 is design high quality lessons. Principle 4 is adapt to your lessons as needed. This is also called differentiated instruction, or DI, to adapt your lessons to the unique situation of your learners. 5, monitor and assess student language development. And 6, engage and collaborate within a community of practice. So this community of practice could simply be sharing resources with other ETAs and other ETFs, brainstorm and collaborate a lesson plan together. All right, and hopefully if you do all of these things, we can, next slide, turn a boring, disengaged student body into a really positive, lifelong learner of English. With that, I think we have about 10 or 11 minutes for okay, and we'll have the learning links if you want to review some of the topics that we talked about. And then we'll save the last 10 minutes for a Q&A. If there's any questions, we'll open it up to the other advisors as well. So I think Celine and Sean are still with us. So there's a lot we covered today. If there's a question about teaching or something we didn't cover, feel free to ask. It's a great opportunity. You have all 3 advisors with you, face-to-face, virtually. So go ahead and think about this.
I kind of have more of a comment. I guess it's still a question, but for the one with the drill sergeant, that example, something I heard from like being an early on teacher is like you maybe want to be a little more strict because you don't want to get walked all over by the students. Do you guys recommend doing that in Taiwan, or still recommend a more, I guess, laid back approach?
So that's a great question. It's definitely a balancing act, and I think we have a classroom management workshop upcoming. Part of it is also your co-teaching, and the LET is usually the one who will be the stricter, say, teacher between the LET and the ETA, because for an ETA, it can be hard to know what are the behavioral norms in a classroom, like how much fun is too much fun, how much energy is, how loud is too loud, right? Or how much engagement is too much engagement. So we come from the US with our own ideas and norms about this, but the LET knows the Taiwanese context a lot better. So I would defer to them, you know. I think the ETA, you can be good cop, bad cop in a way, you know. Of course, support them with the discipline, like, you know, you don't dump it all on them. But yes, with your younger learners, your first and second graders, it can get out of hand fast, right? A fun activity, you know, you have to constantly monitor that it doesn't get too crazy. Your fourth and fifth graders and sixth graders are usually pretty good. You know, they can have a fun activity and they already know their limits, but your younger learners, your first, second, or third, they're exploring what are those limits? Like, hey, what can I get away with, you know, with teacher Max in the classroom, right? So they're going to test you a little bit more. And we don't have to, like, you know, be a drill sergeant, but just add a little more. We can have fun activities and definitely have fun activities, but have these grounding moments between the activities. Maybe each round, you know, you can have a come together moment where you review the target material, or you get students to sit down in between rounds. Just have some calming or grounding moment between activities. And then next round, okay, get up and have fun again. So that's one way I would say, just to manage that energy. But you're absolutely right. It's a balancing act. And it's going to depend on your school and your LET. But it's a great question. And I think we have time in the next workshop. I think next week is classroom management. But that's one idea I had. Between each round, add some structure.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Celine or Sean, is there anything you would like to add to that?
I would just like to add, you know, I wouldn't personally come in with this, you know, drill sergeant personality. First of all, it's not me, but also maybe you also have to keep in mind that potentially, it's not true for everybody. Potentially, you might be the first foreigner teacher that the students have, so you don't want to scare them. But like Matt said, you want to have those structures in your activity. So if you want like this crazy fun activity, make sure you think ahead of time of the logistics so that there's very little idleness and that both of you and your LET have eyes on everybody. Because that's when the students are like, ooh, I can get away with this, or ooh, I can do that. So just think of the logistics for your activities. From what I've been reading from your guys's activity, your scavenger hunts, you guys have a lot of like moving around stuff, which is great. But again, that can get a little crazy. So just, you know, make sure you have boundaries, you establish those from the beginning, and have that structure.
Excellent point, Celine. Excellent. And then are there any other questions? So thanks, Max. That's a wonderful question. Anybody else have any other teaching questions? So I know it's all brand new. It's a brand new place and context. So there's got to be some questions on your mind.
I have a quick question. I think one of the things I'm really nervous about is how to challenge students that are more advanced while not like leaving behind students that learning English is a bit more of a challenge for them. And I was wondering if you guys have like any go-to activities that are really great to like combine that, where you're able to push those more advanced students, but also really able to help out some of the students that may need a bit more extra help. So I guess, yeah, like activities that kind of combine both of those aspects.
Excellent question, Emily. Yes, so a question about mixed level. How do you deal with the classroom and target students equally when you have mixed levels in your classroom? I think this is a great question for Sean.
Oh, man. Yeah, so we've discussed this, the other advisors and I don't know if it's this semester or next, but we're probably going to have a workshop on differentiated instruction, where we'll talk about what to do when you have a class with different levels and different needs, how to kind of bring out like the mentor roles with the students that are more advanced, you know, how to group the students, giving them extra homework or extra work, and things like, you know, supplementary work, getting in touch with specific parents. So it really depends on the context, and it's hard to summarize in like a minute or two, but it's something we could definitely make a workshop on that could be an hour or two. But there's a lot of different strategies, but again, it depends, you know, what country you're in, how old are they, how big is the difference between the students, because sometimes you'll be in a situation where you're not in charge of the students that come in, and so you might have a big gap in their ability, and that can be really challenging. So, you know, in some cases it's big where you have to actually have a student or two or change the classroom. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to handle it, but topically this is like all we can talk about, I think, for right now. I mean, is there anything else, Celine, you would add to that?
Sure. I'll just quickly add, because yeah, it's a lot. There's so many things that you can do in the class. Were you in the workshop yesterday, Emily? Where I talked about the six method or the 6 approaches to co-teaching? Maybe not.
No, we had our school placement announcement.
Okay. All right. So when you're, one of the advantages of co-teaching is you can use different types of co-teaching, and especially when you have those different levels. So when you have like parallel teaching or alternative teaching, or co-teaching, parallel co-teaching and alternative co-teaching, those are 2 styles that you can use when you have that disparity in levels. We will talk about them probably in a couple weeks, and but you can look them up there. If you guys just Google the 6 approaches to co-teaching, there's 6 and that's it. Or the most, like the common ones, and those 2 can help you out with those different levels.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great input, Celine and Sean. And yeah, to follow up, I also like this idea of the mentor-mentee. So part of challenging our higher level students is also giving them more responsibility. So they could be a little teacher in a way, they could be their group leader. The group leader has to check the workbook or check the exercise or make sure the students can pronounce the vocabulary or translate the vocabulary. So I think part of the mixed level is just giving our higher level students a little more responsibility in the classroom. And this is challenging them in a different way, right? They're having responsibility so they're not bored. And they're also facilitating learning in the classroom. And a lot of cooperative group games, you know, with equal participation. You can have a whiteboard activity with a whiteboard marker. In each round, a different student has to write. And you're going to see when the weaker student it's his turn, you're going to see the stronger students, helping him along, which is beautiful to watch. So kind of these activities is you're going to build this cooperative interaction where you're going to see higher level and lower proficiency students helping each other because the team wants to win the activity. So kind of having these competitive group work, I think, is a very good way to do it also. Running out of time, maybe we have time for one more question. I know it's late over there, but thank you, Emily. That was an awesome question.
Hi, I do have a question if we have time for one more. So I'm really interested in the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset of using specific language to further have like students having a growth mindset. So rather than saying like, oh, you're so smart, you could say to the student, oh, you work so hard. Or if a student says, oh, I'm not good at math, encouraging them to say, oh, you're just not good at math yet. Right, so those little language differences in how students approach their learning. I'm curious if you all have learned specific language statements like that, or things that we could say as teachers to encourage students to be more open-minded and to be, you know what I mean, to have that growth mindset.
So that is a fascinating question. So I've never thought about that before, but I believe Sean has.
Yeah, I've thought about everything, so no problem. Yeah, so this is really a new phrasing, growth mindset. This is something I'm sure most of my peers never heard when we were students. But as a teacher, it's really good to think about multiple intelligences, right? So you're gonna have some students that are really good at certain things and other students that struggle. And yeah, the way we give them feedback is really crucial, especially when they're young and very sensitive, and when you're saying it in front of other people. So I think it's good to always stress that we all have different strengths, and just because Kevin did really well on that assignment, and another student didn't do very well, it's always a good chance to remind them. But Johnny is really good at this, and we're gonna do that next week. So it's good to be positive, be sensitive, focus on growth, but also remind them like we all have strengths and weaknesses, and to focus on how they can kind of balance each other out.
Thank you.
And I also add, like, now we have abundance and scarcity mindset as well. So these mindsets are evolving too. But yeah, I think the vocabulary might be too hard for younger learners, but definitely junior high school, you could do a lesson on the growth mindset. I think that'd be awesome. And they'd also learn the yet and other things. So I think it's a fascinating topic. I haven't seen it done before, but it's definitely would make an awesome lesson plan. And then, we have to continue those themes and build on that throughout the semester as well. So yeah, I would think that's an awesome idea. Unfortunately, I think we're out of time. I think it's pretty late over there. I'll stick around a bit if anybody has any other questions that we didn't get to. I'm happy just to chill here for a bit. If not, I'll let you guys go to bed. Here's my contact information if you want to shoot me an email or a line message if you have any questions on anything we talked about. But also appreciative for Sean and Celine for sticking with us and answering your very hard-hitting questions. And we're very excited for you to arrive in Taiwan. And I know when I first started teaching in Japan, I was terrified. Like I went to my local community college and I took public speaking courses. I was that afraid. But so coming from that, I can assure you that it's not that complicated, right? We overcomplicate it with these things, but just be yourself, have that passion, have that energy, and have that heart, have that authentic sincerity, and you guys will do amazing. With that said, thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.